Yes, sir. Malicious compliance. About 15 years ago, I was in the army and I had what we'll call a very unique skill set. There were several people in my unit with that specific skill set, but for some odd reason all of the hot, 20 to 26 females got Monday through Thursday shifts and had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off, while guys like me got Thursday through Monday night shifts, despite having seniority over some of the ladies in both rank and time on mission. To make things worse, administrative staff like our commanding officer and platoon sergeant, bosses, worked Monday through Friday and weren't willing to budge on us being active during their work hours. This meant that quarterly training like PowerPoints we had to watch for sexual harassment typically occurred both on my day off and in the middle of my sleep time. Given that I worked 16-hour shifts and the round trip to base was an hour, I was perpetually sleep deprived. Even if I got off of work on time and went straight home, I could optimistically get 6 hours of sleep per day between driving, eating, and showering. This went on for years over my objections. I literally went nearly 2 years without a day off concurrently with my wife, a day worker. Interestingly, the Army did a study demonstrating that after 18 hours of consciousness, you make the same number of stupid and careless mistakes as if you were legally intoxicated. Sadly, no one told my PSG, platoon sergeant aka boss. He decided that sleep deprivation didn't matter. In fact, one day when I was transitioning from a junior enlisted, technically a specialist, but if you're not familiar with Army ranks, think private, to an NCO, sergeant, my PSG decided I needed some NCO responsibilities. Reasonable. We were having a range day, we had to qualify annually with the M16 rifle, and we needed a duty driver to shuttle soldiers back and forth from the barracks. I was a volunteer. Suffice it to say that I was on loan to a certain agency, and I needed to put in an ops release to miss work. It was rejected due to staffing issues. At the time, there was no one else available that could do a certain thing that I could do. I told my PSG and he informed me that the ops release was a courtesy. I was going, and it would only take 8 to 10 hours. But Sergeant, I tried to explain, I work 16 straight hours leading up to the start of this driving, and I'd have to work another 14 straight hours at the end of it. On top of that, as a driver I'd be driving soldiers down winding roads I'm not familiar with in a van bigger than anything I've ever driven before while half asleep. Then, at the end of what would be a 40-hour shift, I'd need to drive 30 minutes to get home. Does that seem safe? Safe. Specialist, redacted, do you think the soldiers in Iraq right now are safe? As I said, about 15 years ago. Well no, but at least they're getting hazard pay, you're dismissed, specialist. So I mean what could I do? I only fell asleep twice while driving, and both times were at stoplights. I also made every single passenger aware of my sleep situation. Keep in mind I was already sleep deprived coming into this, so they made sure to chat with me, bring me coffee, and do other things that decreased their chances of dying in that van. Around hour 38 of this 40-hour shift, redacted, an important person, swung by my place of duty to check on something. I was literally standing up leaning against a cubicle, eyes closed, basically asleep, with 4 empty quad coffees. If Starbucks had a size above venti, it would be quad, sitting on my desk. Per tradition, there was an NCO with the VIP officer. I got chewed out backwards, forwards, sideways, upside down, and in dimensions I was not hitherto aware of. By military protocol, the NCO beside the angry officer did the chewing out. He threatened me with actual dereliction of duty charges as well. This ended with, now explain to me, specialist, why on God's green earth you think it's okay to sleep on duty. So I explained to him that I was literally semi-conscious on my feet, I'd drunk so much coffee I started having heart palpitations and decided to stop, and that it was hour 38 on duty and I was simply at my limits. I cannot stress enough that important people cared about what I was doing. A lot. Really important people. At this point the officer stepped in. You've been doing this for 38 straight hours. So I explained to her how I'd had to drive a van around during my sleep time and this important mission had informed my unit that I was irreplaceable, but my unit decided it was critical that I, specifically the guy with the irreplaceable skill set who was working shift, be the duty driver that day. I further explained how this wasn't that uncommon. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd had a week where I was allowed to sleep during my sleep time for the entire week uninterrupted. The number of silly things I had to do instead of sleeping was mind-boggling. Who is your commanding officer? I tried not to smile and told her. Carry on, specialist. Needless to say, by lunchtime, aka the equivalent of maybe 1 a.m. for me, I got a phone call. Report to the PSG's office right now. I sighed, to say that I was sleepy was something of an understatement, and keep in mind I got home around 8 a.m. and had to work again around 4 p.m. The round trip to base alone would take an hour, plus I had to get dressed, be presentable, and deal with their nonsense, then undressed again afterwards, then dressed again and drive back. Please explain to me why the command sergeant major of, redacted, just chewed me out over our in-house scheduling decisions. So I told him what happened. You told the redacted of redacted that, should I have lied to my mission commander about my level of readiness, Sergeant? He turned red. Like Santa's cheeks, not a Norse berserker. No berserker-like traits at all. Nope. I took a totally professional step backwards. He was about 6 feet 2 inches and 250 pounds of NCO, and I felt like I was hogging all of his oxygen. Get out. So I did. It came down from on high that our unit was to have 2 quarterly training days henceforth. No more waking us shift workers up 1 to 2 times per week every freaking week for administrative crap, period. All missions were informed that our soldiers would be doing one of the 2 training days, pick one. Happy ending, right? Yeah, that's never how it works in the military when you get someone above you in trouble. What's the nastiest, stupidest duty you can imagine giving someone that was stateside in a strategic unit? The urinalysis guy. For those of you that don't know, it's his duty to plan and execute urinalyses. This requires literally looking at your fellow soldiers' junk because there are a variety of products that can fool a urinalysis, and the only way to know what, just trust me. It's nasty. Fortunately, there was a loophole. You see, the powers that be are aware of the good old boys system that develops sometimes in the army, and it's really, really important that the guy with the grenade launcher isn't also on crack. As a result, per regs as they existed at that time, and maybe even now, if the urinalysis guy calls a urinalysis, it takes a full bird colonel to cancel it. That's one step down from a general. That's right, when the urinalysis guy decides it's time for the monthly urinalysis, wake up, get in uniform, drive to where he says it's happening, and God help you if you've got alcohol or something in your system. To make matters worse, for them, a friend of mine, let's call him Kroger, had been punished for having alcohol in his system during one of their urinalyses. It was on his day off because he was a shift worker, and it was during hours that were duty hours to the day workers but off duty for us. I had about a year left, no intention of re-enlisting, and my unit had already been slapped down by angry people for mucking with me. Let's do this. Malicious compliance time. Imagine this, it's 11 p.m. on a Friday on a long weekend. Long for them, not me. You see, shift workers didn't get holidays off unless we took leave, and I needed mine for family time like Thanksgiving and Christmas, because without it, I'd have been working every single holiday. The mission must go on after all. Now, anyone that's ever seen an army movie knows that Joes like booze, and anyone that's ever had to do a urinalysis knows that they can detect alcohol. Mind you, being a urinalysis guy is a big deal, you're on legal orders and everything, entered into Big Army's database. Between the time I began the formal process of calling a urinalysis and the time I would have had them coming in, 3 am on their days off, since they'd established the precedent that soldiers don't get days off, whenever we complained about losing sleep to stuff like this, my orders vanished. To this day, I don't know how they did it. I suspect that our CO or some other bigwigs were at a party or something and realized that they were about to have to explain to a full bird colonel how half of the unit pissed hot in a urinalysis, which would have required, legally required, that colonel having a one-on-one chat with me about why I chose that time, and perhaps a discussion about how the unit was being run. Yeah. They never gave me another duty the entire time I had left in the army. I never had an issue with another leave request, and they generally just left me alone. At the time, I thought it was because I'd made my point that I was sick of their shit, but looking back, I wonder who would have come up positive for what specific drugs during that surprise urinalysis such that they were able to rescind my Big Army orders in less than 1 day, and in the middle of the night at that.